only know what's going on and show up at selectmen meetings, but also then go back to Beacon Hill and be able to actually provide an effective response relating to constituent issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Armato, same question.
If I could just start by giving you a brief description of my campaign, it might give you some insight into how I plan on being an effective legislator. We started our campaign on February 2nd of this year in the snow, attending all 21 Democratic caucuses in all 17 towns. Since then, I personally have been door-to-door in all 17 towns in this district. We needed to collect 300 signatures to get our names on the ballot. I'm proud to say that my team and I have collected over 1,500, over 5 times as many signatures as we needed. I believe that there's a big difference between Mark and I and Bruce and I on approach on how to be an effective legislator. I launched a campaign website in March over 6 months ago, which goes into great detail on 20 specific issues, and that was in March. That just shows my commitment to the issues, not only local issues, but statewide issues. When I do travel this district, either walking door to door or making phone calls, sitting in people's living rooms or talking to them on their phones, that's where I get my perspective on issues. I have a strong set of values in where I come from and what I believe in, but my formation of opinion on various local issues and statewide issues comes from listening to other people. I won't sit here tonight and claim that I have the answers to every issue, but I will sit here tonight and tell you that I will come to your house and listen to you and what you have to say about the issues. And I congratulate Mark on coming around and saying that he'll have a district office. I proposed that having a district office as far back as February, because I believe that this district, as spread out as it is in 17 towns, needs to have a place where we can meet and not have to travel the 20 miles to Boston.
Thank you. And now, our second question, which, Mr. Armato, I'd like you to answer first. What is the single most important action the legislature can take to restart the Massachusetts economy?
I think the legislature has an important role. I believe the economy as a whole is generally run by the actions of the federal government, but I believe that the state government has an extremely important role. I think that we have to stimulate our small businesses. In our district, we have numerous small businesses of all shapes and sizes, and I think that we need to invest in those businesses, but not only in those businesses, in worker training. I think that we need to offer worker training programs through our community college system. I think that if we have the best trained workers, we will also have the best businesses. I think that we need to change the way our state tax policy, not only just looking to increase taxes when we don't have any money, but I think we need to look at where we're spending that money. The government of the state of Massachusetts is the single largest spender of money on business and in research and development in this state, and I think that we should continue to do that. But I also think that we have to spend smarter and extend where our dollars are being put. I think that we need to, again, invest in worker training programs, invest in small business, not only increase startup loans for new businesses, but invest in training people on how to run small businesses, and not just give away big, huge tax cuts to the biggest companies in our state. I think that's a good start, but I think long-term we need to change our tax policy, and I think that we need to encourage people to come to this Commonwealth. I didn't say this previously, but I was a small business owner for a couple of years, creating jobs, investing in this community and the surrounding towns, and I know firsthand how tough it is to run a small business. I wish there was more help out there when I started, but through a lot of hard work, I think that we succeeded. I think that we, as future legislators, could take a proactive role in helping out small businesses and worker training instead of sitting back and letting our economy slide further in decline.
Thank you. Mr. Caggiano?
For my sort of economic development model, I'm going to appropriate, otherwise known as steal, a page from the book of Paul Tsongas. Paul Tsongas is a political hero of mine. In fact, I worked on his presidential campaign briefly. And if you take a look at the city of Lowell, and if you're familiar with it as it was 10 years ago and as it is now, you'll see that it has just been transformed. If you go down to the city center, you'll see that the historic buildings have been developed, the parking is ample, the streets are clean, there are guides and programs and facilities, baseball parks, hockey rinks, things that really provide a sense of community. In a town like Gloucester or an area like Tri-Town, with that kind of focus and that kind of economic development, with a lot of hard work. Paul Tsongas also went into the parks himself and pulled weeds, and because of that example, brought people into the streets, Republican and Democrat, to actually bring about some change. I would increase job training. I would take the money right now that's in the Renewable Energy Trust and use it for what it was intended, to develop renewable energy sources in Massachusetts. And that's not just a simple, liberal notion. That is where our jobs will be. When we develop, greater solar technology, when we create wind turbines with factories in Massachusetts, that we can have jobs, and jobs based upon a green economy. So it is a desirable way of approaching business. But we also need to have an elastic economy, and that means job training through our community colleges and through our community schools. But we need to be able to present people options for when one industry changes, such as defense or, in the old days, shoe manufacture. We need to give them an opportunity to do something else. And that's something that the state should really and deeply get involved in. Thank you.
Mr. Caggiano, if Massachusetts continues to produce garbage at its current rate, the state will need to build more landfills and incinerators. What will you do to promote trash reduction and recycling and negate the need for more incinerators and landfills?
I think that's a critical issue, and one of the things that we need to look at closely is existing policies that are guiding trash towards incinerators in various parts of the state. I'm from North Andover, and unfortunately we are blessed with a rather large and noxious incinerator where 23 communities focus their trash. And there is a perverse economic model that punishes the towns when they go below the proper tonnage for consumption in the incinerator. So one of my first priorities is exactly that, to look at those kinds of negative incentives to recycling, to look at advancing recycling policy. I'll give you an example. Worcester, when they were having a crisis with trash, they imposed a bag program where people had to purchase bags, and anything that went into the bag was in effect taxed by 50 cents a bag, and at times it was up to $1. And however, recycling was complete and free, and only a very few items were restricted. So whatever wasn't recycled and whatever wasn't compost could readily go into one bag, or maybe one bag every 2 weeks. So that's the policy that I think we need to look at. Maybe not something as radical as Worcester, but that notion of getting as much percentage of the recyclable stream, going towards, the recycling bin. I know that North Andover's recycling program is terrible, and that people are really working hard to advance it so that different kinds of plastic, a greater variety of materials can be brought through the system and not just sort of stuck there waiting for someone to decide whether it's recyclable or not, and then we just throw it away. So I think there's a lot of effort that we can do, and there's a lot of effort that isn't being done, and we should get on it. Thank you.
Mr. Armato, same question.
I think the question can be answered in two folds. I think it's the question should be answered: what can we do on a local level, personally in our communities, and what can we do as hopeful elected officials? On the first notion of being active in the community, I'm glad to see that North Reading, my current town, instituted a recycle program just this year. I'd also like to say that I've been active in the recycling industry. When I was in school at Northeastern University, I don't want to say I was instrumental because that would be taking too much credit, but I did work with the university in implementing a recycling program in the dormitories. I think that we should encourage local universities, which you are all well aware of, that we have many of in the city of Boston, encourage them to start recycle programs. Northern Essex Community College currently does not have a recycling program on campus. I think that's a grave travesty. I think that as an elected official I could take a leadership role in working with their the people at that school to implement a recycling program. I think from the state point of view, I would file a bill to require manufacturers to use more recyclable programs, more recyclable products. I think that is something as a legislator I can do, and that would be a bill that I would file. It wouldn't be a big hit with the manufacturers either in the state or outside of the state, but I think it's something that we need to do because we are in a crisis in managing what we're going to do with our waste disposal. So that's something that we could do on the state level. We should also increase recyclable products that the state uses. The state is a big purchaser of supplies, and we should, mandate that the state, when they purchase supplies, should use renewable products, and we should also increase the state's recycling program. I think that those are the two aspects that we could work on. Most importantly, I think that we could legislate manufacturers using more renewable manufacturing materials.
Thank you. My next question, Mr. Armato, is despite the fact that North Andover is the host community of the Greater Lawrence Sewerage District, governing board members from other municipalities outnumber those from North Andover. If elected, would you work to increase North Andover's representation on this board from 1 to 3?
I think the way that we should look at that is it should be based on the amount, the population and the communities involved, and it should be based on the amount of trash consumption within those towns. I think that each town should have a fair representation on that board. Whatever fair is, I believe it would be based on the amount of the population and the amount of trash being used at that facility. I would also like to work, a big issue of mine is local control and unfunded mandates. I think that the state could play a leadership role in making sure that that board and that consortium worked in an equitable fashion. I don't think that necessarily increasing the number of people on a committee is the best way to do that. I think that we should look at it as a whole, and that we should take care of the community that has the incinerator in it. But I think that we should also make sure it's fair for the other communities involved, not only in price but also in representation on the board.
Thank you.
Well, the simple answer is yes. I do think that North Andover should have a greater role on that committee. The GLSD has been a thorn of contention, a point of contention, and a thorn on our side in North Andover some time. North Andover is an unusual community in that it is a focal point for an enormous number of pollution sources, which may surprise some people, but not when you note that Lawrence is next door. And Lawrence and North Andover have been, in many ways, punished because of a lack of ability until recently to prevent that kind of imposition of environmental, travesties. I have been endorsed by Clean Water Action because of my environmental positions and policies. I worked personally to prevent an additional trash facility from being placed in North Andover, and I will take a good bit of credit that went through. Myself and People for the Environment, a marvelous group that has done great work to keep North Andover and Haverhill and Lawrence clean. I think we need to look at the notion of environmental justice, where communities themselves are not being, punished for having something either within them or on the border. North Andover was oftentimes disenfranchised because things were placed on the other side in Haverhill or on the in the Lawrence area. So I think we need to look at pollution sources in a regional way, so that a town like North Andover or Boxford or Georgetown is not the victim of the downstream effluent or particulate matter coming out of the incinerator. I think that's something that we need to give people a place at the table, not only at GLSD, but also when it comes to the site assessment for those various programs. As I said before, there's a pipeline going through my town and other towns, and people felt disenfranchised there, and I think that's something that we need to work on to make sure people feel that they're being heard and not being imposed upon. Thank you.
My next question here, Mr. Caggiano, is the Merrimack Valley has more than its share of regional pollutants. Would you actively encourage the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs to stop new sightings and expansion of these facilities? What action would you take?
Well, that's an easy one. As I just mentioned, I think that on a regional basis, we should be allowing, whether it's ad hoc regional basis or on a county-wide basis, allowing some kind of planning, both in the local Board of Health level but also on the state level, to make sure that we don't have one particular community shouldering too much of a burden. It's critical to prevent that kind of environmental injustice. And I've used North Andover as an example, but I'll use another town that I grew up in, Winthrop, Mass. Winthrop had the Deer Island sewage treatment